Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third in a new series of video interviews that the Arizona Capitol Times is conducting with the movers and shakers around the state capitol in lieu of our traditional Q&A format, which has been sidelined by the coronavirus, as have many other things. We're here this afternoon with Emily Anne Gullickson, who is the founder and CEO of education nonprofit A for Arizona, which has recently set out on its own after disaffiliating with the Arizona Chamber Foundation. Previously, she headed that Chamber Foundation and in that capacity led the previous iteration of A for Arizona, among other initiatives. She's been named by the Arizona Capitol Times as a breakout Politico under 40 and is widely respected in the Capitol community for her work in education. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Great. So we'll kind of start with the basic question. Obviously, this is a bit of a new adventure for you. If you could tell us a little bit about how the sort of new independent version of A for Arizona came about and why break with the Chamber Foundation?
Sure. Well, we're just really excited to be able to carry on the mission as a standalone 501c3. Education is obviously a top priority issue for voters, for the business community, for our school leaders, parents, and this was really our next chapter to be able to partner with more organizations, more community leaders, and really grow our impact out on our own. So we're very grateful for the partnership with the State Chamber Foundation, and the Tucson Hispanic Chamber, where we were able to incubate for many years and are excited to be out on our own.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, you're kind of growing beyond the confines of the chamber. More flexibility now is possible. You can partner with different organizations that are not within the confines of the chamber. Is that basically the idea?
Yeah, and our top priority still is focused on students, mm-hmm. access to excellence, and being able to broaden our efforts there out on our own, where our sole focus can just be on K-12.
Mm-hmm. And if you could just sort of give me a sense of what the sort of elevator pitch for your organization's mission is, and did that really change at all moving from the chamber to now independent, or is that focus still the same?
We still firmly believe that no child should have to wait to find the school where they can unleash their ultimate potential, and still very much focused on expanding excellence and really making sure that every child in Arizona has access to a great school and classroom that's proximate to them. Our new chapter really allows us to be able to expand the stakeholders that we work with and really look forward to what will unleash possibility for students with K-12 as our only focus.
Great. What do you see, with that in mind? Obviously, the coronavirus has thrown a wrench into a lot of lives of educators and school officials through the sort of prism of your organization's goals. What do you see as the biggest kind of objectives and aims that the education community here in Arizona will be looking to achieve as we hurtle towards the beginning of the school year in a couple months?
We definitely saw this spring that there was a cluster of innovative, agile school principals and system leaders who really embraced the new flexibilities that the state legislature and governor's office and Superintendent Hoffman's office provided to them. They really still stayed focused on academic outcomes and student needs and took advantage of things like waived seat time, instructional hours, more flexibility. And so I think right now is a chance for educators to really be able to embrace creativity, for us to really see if these policies that people have been hungry for a while, do they work in action? So it's going to take some courage to do that bold leadership and vision. But from me being able to travel virtually around the state with leaders from Snowflake down to Nogales and Ajo and everywhere in between, it's been fun to hear about some of these creative solutions. You've heard lots of buzzwords about hybrid schools and virtual schools, and leaders are really jumping at this chance to better serve students and parents' needs. And so I'm curious about, what does that do for students? Obviously, we've been making steady gains that have captured national eyes for a while now on our steady gains upwards academically, but we're still dropping the ball on meeting all students' needs and giving them access to a high quality education. And so I think there's a lot of potential here, but it's definitely going to take a lot of work.
And there's also great potential, I would imagine, for some of those same divides that you just mentioned to worsen in some ways because of the challenges that the virus creates. And obviously not every school has the same access to, you know, broadband, let alone Zoom. Certainly not every student does. You know, we've kind of seen a little preview of potential solutions to some of these divides in the executive order today, but I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about, you know, how specifically, obviously there's great test cases that we can point to. Not every school will be able to find those same kinds of successes. For those that are struggling, either because their students don't have the resources to participate in these kind of newfangled hybrid courses or what have you, or the schools themselves don't have the resources or the training, what are some ways to kind of begin bridging those divides?
So I think some of it comes down to mindset and being able to look to who's proving what's possible, especially in unlikely settings, right? So I think there's a lot of assumptions that the haves and have-nots break along socioeconomic lines. And we definitely are seeing countless leaders who are beating the odds despite serving our most vulnerable students and are showing results. And so instead of jumping straight to I can't and here's why, it's finding those proof points. We're proud at AFE Arizona to be able to elevate a lot of those schools who are able to show what's possible and breaking through a lot of that narrative. But unfortunately, mindset is there. Now, that being said, we're obviously very grateful for the infusion of the federal CARES funding and GEARS funding today. It's a huge support that all of our schools in the public sector will benefit from. But we definitely also want to recognize that there are leaders who have come up with great solutions instead of everyone having to reinvent the wheel, turning to those who have figured it out and leveraging how can you adapt it, adopt it, and modify. There's lots of learning proof points locally and nationally right now.
Mm-hmm. Are there some specific districts or principals that you've spoken with who, in your mind, have done this particularly well? You know, made the most of kind of a bad situation. You know, I think for a lot of parents and students, they hear these terms, these buzzwords, like you mentioned, they seem sort of abstract. I think it might be sort of helpful if we could look at a specific school or district that has kind of done this well. Do any come to mind for you?
Sure. So in Nogales Unified and Mexicali Academy are leading the way in my mind with parent academies, upskilling parents, just like you would with teachers and professional development around technology. You have Great Hearts Academy, a classical education that's been totally flipped virtually, and they're engaged in live discussions and debates, which we haven't seen across the state yet. You've got other proof points with Phoenix Union and Vista College Prep, who have both flipped right in the Phoenix urban core and are going online. And then you've got other solid leaders like in Congress, at Congress Elementary School, in Heber Overguard, in Snowflake, who are partnering up with the best minds to really not have that excuse that we're rural or remote, and trying to find ways to best meet families' needs and make sure that learning continues. You know, unfortunately, there are some groups right now that are pushing against data and outcomes and focusing in on serving students. I think that we know from our best schools that emotional and social supports will happen as part of a great school culture. And so we can't lose sight of the academic side as well. We want kids to be moving forward and not referring to this year as sort of a lost year, which unfortunately we've started to hear. And I think there's a lot of potential for our kids to accelerate.
Mm-hmm. I want to shift gears a little bit where we've heard a lot of talk around the Capitol about special sessions of all kinds, yeah. 1, 2, none, depends on who you ask. Folks in the education community have been calling for a special session specifically to address their needs. Again, some of that maybe we kind of saw in the executive order today in lieu of legislative action. I'm curious to hear from you, what do you think has been left undone that if the governor does so choose to call lawmakers into a special session, or if lawmakers are able to get the majority necessary to get themselves a special session, or even stuff that they can do in the next regular session, what are the kind of big outstanding priorities for the education community that can either help to complete the recovery from this period, or just sort of general policy changes that you think now is the time to make?
Yeah, well, I think we had a lot of positive changes made today. So I'm hoping that schools embrace that and take action. So very grateful for the leadership there to give our schools some stability to just go into act and enact mode. One of the things that came up a lot was that parents really realized that they have choices right now on where they go. And we really have left alone some of our open enrollment lottery processes. I very much, and our organization is very much supportive of local control, but there are also a lot of roadblocks for many of our parents and families who have found a school model that's the right fit, and just very complex situations with very narrow timeframes on how to engage and find the school that's the right fit for them. I'm thrilled that we have an organization called Families Empowered coming to Tucson to help be that navigator with parents, to help them navigate the choices and how to actually enroll. They've done great work in Texas, so that's a huge addition to Arizona. We also are seeing schools that now that they have this digital platform, they want to be able to serve more students outside of their geographic boundaries. And so we're going to have to fix our funding mechanisms to catch up and keep pace. We need dollars to follow students to where they go. And there are parents who are hungry to have more stackable options where you might take a handful of classes at a district site in a high school, but you might have a few niche electives at a charter school, for example. Still public schools, but wanting to be able to really embrace these new choices that they've been exposed to, realizing that learning, I think everyone's been aware now, it doesn't happen just in one single classroom. And so how do we embrace that like we have at the high school level with programs like dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, and some of these great things that have really captured students' attention to stay engaged. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And because of the disruption we're seeing with parents and kids moving with their feet, we're going to have to tackle transportation and some of the funding mechanisms to make sure that we're really empowering students on where they're actually going and able to get there.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're kind of saying that obviously, though, this presents some challenges, that there might be some things that families find in this time that actually work better for them than the school system before, and those are maybe changes that can be codified as opposed to just sort of temporary fixes for the current moment.
Yeah, and also not everyone is obviously leaving their schools. Some of them have also found that they really are thriving on these virtual academies. Thrilled with Kyrene's effort, for example, to be one of the first, if not the first in Arizona, to publicly say, like, we have choices for you. If you want this hybrid model, you have it. If you want this virtual academy, you have it. And I think that is really recognizing not only just this new era we're in, but just what families want for that whole wraparound experience for their student. Mm-hmm. And so being able to tap into more of that as well.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just ask one last thing before we conclude. I've seen some op-eds that you've written, kind of about teaching in the current moment, not just with the pandemic, but also, this sort of unveiling for, I think, a lot of Americans who maybe weren't so aware of, the extent of racial injustice and violence in this country. How do you think teachers can kind of best integrate these real-time lessons that we're learning into their lesson plans and so on and so forth in the coming school year? Whether that be hybrid or online. There's like a lot of debate that's even happening on school grounds about things like school resource officers. I mean, these are far from abstract examples for a lot of schools, a lot of students, and a lot of families. Recognizing that obviously these are difficult questions to answer. What are some ways that educators can begin to sort of internalize some of the things that we're seeing and help students process that and learn from it moving forward?
Yeah, one of our board members, Janelle Wood, who's the founder of Black Mothers Forum, just spoke to a handful of our school partners on Friday about this very issue. And she emphasized, and I totally agree, being able to do a better job listening, especially leading up to this next school year, talking to our parents of color and asking them, like, what do you need in order to be supported? Like, how did you feel during this experience? And what do you need for your kids to feel safe and supported in their learning environment day one coming back? I did Teach for America back in the day here in Phoenix, and they were really intentional about restorative justice practices and resources, but a lot more on the listening part, a lot more on asking and learning. And I think that there are a lot of great resources in town. We have the chief of staff to the new teacher project here in town. They have a lot of great resources. And so I think asking for help and being able to listen and really take constructive feedback is a great first start. I'm also really excited about new models that have come online in the last few years, like Phoenix International Academy in South Phoenix. Just really brilliant leadership and people that I would go to in a heartbeat to learn from.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Again, this has been Emily Anne Gullickson, founder and CEO of A for Arizona, a local education nonprofit. I am Aaron Kimball-Sandett, House reporter from the Arizona Capitol Times, and I believe we are finished. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Bye.